Hey everyone, welcome back. You ready to dive into some seriously juicy history with me today?
Always up for a good deep dive. Let's do it.
Okay, so we're cracking open the books of 2 Samuel, but not the parts you usually hear about. We're talking chapters 19 through 21.
Yeah, these chapters are often overlooked. People tend to stop reading after the dramatic climax of Absalom's rebellion.
Right, like happily ever after and all that. But things get really interesting after the rebellion ends.
Exactly. Because King David, he's back in charge, but things are a mess.
Total mess, right? You'd think after putting down a rebellion led by his own son, he'd be, relieved, celebrating even.
Right, victory. But that's not what we see at all.
Not even close. So paint the picture for us. What's the scene when we catch up with David?
Okay, so David, he's finally returning to Jerusalem after Absalom's defeat. But he's utterly consumed by grief.
Grief for Absalom. The guy who, hello, tried to overthrow him.
Yeah, it's wild, right? It's like, how do you even process that? You're victorious, but at what cost?
Such a complex emotional situation, right? And I mean, it's his son, but still. Talk about an awkward homecoming.
Awkward is putting it mildly. It actually gets pretty tense because David's grief, it's so all-consuming that he's practically ignoring his duties as king.
Oh, no, that's not good. Not good at all. A king can't just, check out.
Exactly. And someone notices. His general, Joab is not one to mince words.
Oh, I've heard about Joab. What does he do?
He decides to give David a serious reality check, like straight up confronts him.
Whoa. Bold move.
It's a really fascinating moment. We read about it in 2 Samuel 19.57. Joab basically tells David, get it together. Your people just risk their lives for you. You're acting like you lost, not like you won.
Ouch. I mean, can you imagine having the guts to say that to the king?
Right. It speaks volumes about Joab's character, but also about their relationship. Joab was fiercely loyal to David, but also pragmatic. He knew the kingdom was on shaky ground.
So it's like tough love, but out of loyalty.
Exactly. He's like, look, I'm saying this for your own good, for the good of the kingdom. And amazingly, David seems to get it. He pulls himself together, addresses the people.
Okay, so crisis averted. Everyone's back on the same page.
You wish. Just when you think things are settling down, another conflict erupts.
Ugh, seriously. What now?
This time, it's not a rebellion, but it's just as dangerous. The Israelites, they start bickering amongst themselves.
But they just won. Shouldn't they be, celebrating, throwing a giant feast?
You'd think so. But remember, the kingdom was deeply divided, even before Absalom's rebellion. There were all these simmering tensions, especially between Judah, David's tribe, and the rest of Israel.
Oh, right. Tribal rivalries. I forgot about that.
Yeah, and Absalom, he totally exploited those divisions during the rebellion. And those tensions, they don't magically disappear just because Absalom's gone.
So it's like this underlying current of resentment is just bubbling to the surface.
Exactly. And David's savvy as ever, he knows he needs to address it, but carefully.
So David's got a kingdom on edge, old rivalries flaring up. What does he do?
Well, he pulls one of his classic power moves.
Yeah.
He appoints Amasa as the new army commander.
Hold on, Amasa. Wasn't he Absalom's right-hand man, leading the rebellion right alongside him?
The one and only.
That is some next-level strategy. So what's the thinking there? Rubbing his enemies' noses in it.
Not quite. Remember, David was known for being incredibly shrewd, but also merciful.
Okay, yeah.
Appointing Amasa is a brilliant move. It showed he was willing to forgive even those who opposed him so directly.
A gesture of reconciliation, kind of?
Exactly. Like, hey, we just had this whole thing, but I'm choosing to move forward. Let's rebuild together.
Pretty powerful message. But then, we've got this guy Shimei showing up, and it doesn't sound like a friendly visit.
Oh, yeah, Shimei. He represents one of those moments where personal history and, national drama collide.
Fill us in. Who's Shimei and why is he a problem?
Okay, so remember when David had to flee Jerusalem during Absalom's rebellion?
Right. Things were not looking so good for him back then.
Exactly. So as David's fleeing, this guy Shimei comes out and starts cursing him, really laying into him.
Harsh. But people say dumb stuff when they're angry, right?
Sure, but this was different. We're talking ancient Israel. Words carried serious weight, especially curses. It wasn't just being mean. It was like a direct attack on David's right to rule, his divine authority.
Okay, so not just some guy yelling insults from the sidelines. This was a big deal.
Huge. And now, fast forward, David is back in power, and Shimei, he realizes he messed up big time.
Oops.
Yeah, more like, oh crap. So what does he do? He comes crawling back to David, begging for forgiveness.
Can't say I blame him. So what does David do? Does he, banish Shimei or worse?
This is where it gets really interesting. The text actually shows us this really intense back and forth. Abishai, who we've met before, he's like, this guy cursed the king, off with his head.
Yeah, that tracks with what we know about Abishai.
Right. But David, he overrules him. He chooses to forgive Shimei.
Wow. Really? Just like that.
It's a moment that has caused endless debate. Was it true forgiveness? Like a real change of heart? Or was it calculated? Look, merciful, appear strong, don't rock the boat more than it's already been rocked.
Right, because new regimes, they always have to make those tough calls about loyalty and all that.
Exactly. And the text, it doesn't really give us a clear answer. It leaves us wondering what's going on in David's mind. It's brilliant, really.
So mercy may be mixed with some smart politics. David, always the enigma. But then we have this other guy enter the scene, Mephibosheth. Now, he's got a history with David's past, right?
Oh yeah, Mephibosheth, talk about a walking, talking link to the old regime. He's the grandson of King Saul, the King David replaced.
Okay, so Mephibosheth, grandson of the former king, that's got to be a weird position to be in when there's been all this upheaval.
Totally. And things get even more complicated when he's back in Jerusalem and Mephibosheth shows up. But let's just say he's not exactly dressed for the occasion.
Oh. What's the deal? Did he, forget it was a formal event?
Not quite. He claims his servant abandoned him during the whole Absalom mess, left him high and dry so he couldn't travel to meet David, pledges loyalty and all that.
Okay, that's rough, if true, but I sense a but coming.
Big time but. Because then, guess who shows up? The servant.
No way! Talk about awkward.
Right. And of course, the servant, he tells a completely different story. He's all like, Mephibosheth, he's a liar. He totally threw me under the bus.
Oh, man, who do you believe? Classic, he said.
He said, totally. And just like that, we're in the middle of a full-on court drama.
It's amazing, right? The text doesn't give us any easy answers. It's like, did Mephibosheth see a chance to grab power and blow it? Or was he genuinely betrayed? We don't know.
That's frustrating. So what does David do? He's got to make a call, right?
He does. And remember how decisive he was with Shimei, the whole I forgive you thing?
Yeah.
With Mephibosheth, it's totally different. David, he seems genuinely unsure. He ends up giving half of Mephibosheth's land to the servant.
Splitting the baby, huh?
Yeah.
Sounds like a compromise more than a solution. It does, doesn't it? Makes you wonder, was David just exhausted at this point? Or did he suspect something was off, but didn't have the evidence to make a clear judgment?
Right. Sometimes the toughest calls are when you know you don't have all the answers.
Exactly. And speaking of tough calls, the very next chapter, we're hit with this really heavy situation, a famine. And not just any famine. This one's a big deal.
Okay, so famine, bad crops, people struggling, that's never good. What makes this one stand out?
This famine, it's presented as a direct consequence of actions way back in the past, during King Saul's reign. Blood guilt, they called it.
Whoa, blood guilt. That sounds intense. Break it down for us.
So the idea was, if there was some unresolved injustice, like a massacre or broken treaty, especially involving bloodshed, it could have, cosmic repercussions.
Cosmic repercussions, you mean like bad karma?
Kind of.
Yeah.
But on a much bigger scale. Think plagues, droughts, wars, you name it. The land, the people, everything was connected.
Wow. So this famine, it's like the universe saying, hey, remember that thing you guys never dealt with? Yeah, paybacks are a wow,
Exactly. And the text is very clear. This famine, it's tied directly to something Saul did.
Which was?
He broke a treaty with the Gibeonites.
The Gibeonites, remind me who they were again.
They were this group living in Canaan when the Israelites, led by Joshua, were conquering the land. They tricked Joshua into a peace treaty and became basically servants to the Israelites. But years later, Saul, he saw them as a threat, tried to wipe them out, broke the treaty.
So Saul's actions came back to bite decades later. That's some intense generational karma.
Right. And now David, he has to deal with the fallout.
So what does he do? How do you even fix something like that?
This is where it gets really, really tough. The Gibeonites, they demand justice, and they want a blood sacrifice.
Whoa, okay, things just got real. What does that even mean, a blood sacrifice?
It means exactly what you think it means, unfortunately. 7 of Saul's descendants were handed over to the Gibeonites and executed.
Oh, wow, that is harsh. I mean, I get that they were trying to right a past wrong, but still, it's a good reminder of how different things were back then.
Definitely. It's easy to judge based on our modern values, but it's important to remember this was a very different time, a different culture, a different understanding of justice.
For sure. It's not about condoning those actions, but trying to understand them in context. It makes you really appreciate how far we've come in terms of our sense of morality.
Absolutely. But it also makes you think about, what are we doing now that future generations will judge us for? What blood guilt might we be carrying?
Whoa, okay, that's a heavy thought. Definitely something to ponder. Before we get too existential, there's one last thing I wanted to touch on. Towards the end of these chapters, we're reminded that life in ancient Israel, it wasn't all court intrigue and moral dilemmas. There was still a lot of, well, fighting going on.
Oh, yeah, constantly. David's warriors, they're still battling various enemies, including giants. It's wild.
Giants, like Goliath-style giants.
The real deal. And David, he's right there in the thick of it, at least for a while. But then there's this really interesting moment where his men, they basically tell him, okay, enough, you're benched.
Wait, they benched the king, the legendary warrior king? What was that about?
Right. They're basically saying, we need you to be more of a king and less of a soldier now. Remember earlier with Joab, that whole the kingdom needs you thing? It's like that, but on a deeper level.
So it's not that he's too old to fight, it's that his role, it's evolved. He's got bigger responsibilities now.
Exactly. And that's a really powerful lesson for leaders at any level, in any time period. Knowing when to step back, delegate, trust others, that's huge. Sometimes the best way to lead is not from the front lines.
Man, what a journey these chapters have been. We've gone from like family drama to political maneuvering to blood guilt to giant slaying.
Right. Talk about a roller coaster.
Yeah.
But through it all, we've gotten this incredible glimpse into leadership, loyalty, forgiveness, and the long shadow of the past.
Absolutely. It just goes to show some things never really change, do they? The struggles, the choices, the consequences, they're all still relevant to our lives today. So, what resonated with you most in these chapters? What leadership lessons did you take away? Let's keep the conversation going in the comments. Until next time, thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
Welcome to Charlie and Mia's podcast. We're embarking on an exciting journey to read through the entire Bible in just 1 year. Every day, we dive into Scripture, exploring its meanings and how it applies to our lives today. We invite you to join us on this incredible adventure of learning and discovery. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you never miss an episode.